So welcome and thank you for joining us today. And just a few things for housekeeping. Make sure you mute yourself when now we've started. And if you have any questions, please put them in the chat section and we'll deal with those at the end. So just make sure you're on mute and deal with them at the end. Thank you very much. Just to give you a bit of background, and I won't go into too much history, and just to let you know, I started teaching in 1990 during the early stages of IT in education, and if nothing else, it was great for me because all of a sudden I could prepare lessons and write lesson plans. I could type them up and save them and print them, and eventually I managed to banish the Banda machine to the back of the store cupboard. For those who remember what the Banda machines were like, those hand-turned replication sort of photocopy devices, which were so useful, but it was great to see the end of that, I have to say. So computer research and development and use was and is still led by industry. IBM in the early 90s were the biggest computer company in the world, and their focus was on how technology could make business and industry more effective and more efficient and more cost productive. Interestingly, that now shifted more to the consumer side of things, obviously with devices and smartphones and et cetera, but it's still based on industry and needs outside it. At no point has the world technology market been primarily focused on teaching and learning or education and assessment. Of course, technologies, platforms, software, and devices have been developed for education, and the potential of technology in education obviously is enormous. A huge amount of progress has been made, and I'm no way trying to decry or do down the development and creation of some fantastic education tools that we've seen over the last 20 to 30 years. However, we only have to look at recent events to see schools and colleges having to use industry-created platforms for the unfortunate necessity of remote teaching because of the pandemic. And I think it's probably more luck than anything else that some of the platforms have been very useful for education. It's not they were planned to be, it's just they have fortunately been so. I left teaching in 2001, and since then I've been working with schools and governments around the world. And the one question I'm always asked is, what's the key to using technology successfully in a school? What's the most important things to it? Of course, the bad news is that there's no silver bullet to answer this. If there was, I'm sure we'd heard of it a long time ago, and if we had heard of it, those of us who had would probably be very wealthy people. But however, there are some guiding principles that can help education leaders and decision makers make those right decisions. The purchase of classroom technology is one of the most expensive costs a school and a college can incur. And unlike building new facilities and buildings and so on, the lifespan of technology is extremely short. So what we're going to look at is how does a school approach the purchase of technology to enhance and improve teaching and learning. Before I do that, I'm just going to mention something that some of you may have heard of, which was something that Steve Jobs, he gave an interview, I think it was in 1990 or 1991, and he described it the bicycle of the mind. So he saw technology as, he described it as the bicycle of the mind. And his thinking was that if you look in nature, that the most efficient and effective animal in terms of movement, the most efficient movement was the condor, obviously the very large eagle. And that was the most efficient creature on the planet in terms of the energy it needed to do what it needed to do. But what he said was that if we gave a human being a bicycle, then we become the most efficient animal creature on the planet. So with the use of a right piece of technology, all of a sudden our efficiency increases massively. And he described technology as being the same as this, that the bicycle of the mind is the technology we can use to improve our lives. Unfortunately, from those days, as I've already mentioned, the use of technology can focus on what's needed in industry and in the consumer market, not so much in education. But you know, we'll have a look and discuss some of the things that are the most important for them. So in all the conversations I have with decision makers, I use the principle of the 3 I's, that of integration, implementation, and installation. And I like using the nomenclature of the 3 I's because it's easy to remember, and I think it does summarize what's needed. Okay, so historically, and sadly extremely commonplace, decisions are made about technology in education after equipment, hardware, software have been purchased. Having a supercomputer such as this one from about 45 years ago means nothing if you're not clear about what its purpose is going to be. Probably our phones in our pockets have got more computing power than this nowadays, but having the most fantastic, the latest equipment means nothing. And we have to say, okay, we've got this, but so what? So what if we've got it? What does it mean? In my work around the world, I'm seeing, as sure as you have too, examples of ill thought out installations of technology in education institutions. Either, for example, incomplete. So, for example, in the last school I taught at, over one summer holidays, we had Ethernet points were installed, hardwired internet access. It was quite revolutionary for us at the time. And it was installed in the front of the classrooms. In each classroom, the Ethernet points, I think 5 or 6, were put in each one right at the front. However, all of the PowerPoints for the computers and also the class computers were at the back. So even though it was something that was thought this will be useful, its actual the putting of it in was done in such a way that it actually became completely useless. Another example is unplanned and not thought out installation or provision of technology. For example, a school I know of quite recently provided all teachers with an iPad at great expense. So over 200 iPads were purchased for the staff in the school. But they'd failed to check that whether the school network could give the staff access to the applications they needed, such as the school management system and the learning management system. So again, things like this mean that the equipment's going in, but it's not actually being fit for purpose because it's not thought about. Obviously, in this picture, it's a funny little thing really, but a teacher obviously decided to repurpose this hard drive for something much more useful than that they've been provided for in their school. I quite like the idea, but you get the idea, you get the principle I'm talking about. In this context, we move on from the installation, which is actually the last thing we should be thinking about. Implementation means how will the technologies that are being considered, how will they dovetail or work with current good practice and methodologies? There's no point in a technological introduction taking place if it replaces or attempts to replace what is already working well. Professor Margaret Cox taught about the principle of the 7 out of 10. So if all lessons a teacher was teaching were 7 out of 10, what can technology do to make them an 8 out of 10? What can they then do to make them a 9 out of 10? We're not trying to make huge radical changes. We're trying to make step-by-step activities that make small changes that make a huge impact on the learning of the students and the quality of the teaching. I like to use the phrase as well, and I've used many times, that technology in schools and in colleges cannot make a bad teacher a good teacher, but they can help make a good teacher a great one. And that's what we're talking about here, is making sure that what is introduced is actually planned for and fitted into what's already there to make sure that the educational needs are being met. This is often where schools fall down, and they can get blinded by the twinkling lights of the technologies. And when it's introduced for its own sake, not for the sake of the teachers and the students and the learning and the assessment. Implementation should only be considered when core pedagogical questions have been addressed, and this is where we come to the integration. So I like to say that, okay, so it's often the most ignored, and it is we know the most important. It's where we need to ask the sort of so what and what if questions the most. So, for example, what difference would it make to the teaching and learning? Is it going to improve the quality of the teaching? Is it going to make the learning better for the students? What will it do that I cannot do already? What will it do that I can do now? Will it make it faster? Will it make it more efficient? And will it make it better? What do we already have that can meet educational aims, and how do we fit them together? So, for example, interestingly, Imagine Education ran a program for the government of Brunei 6 or 7 years ago, which looked at exactly this. At a national level, how can existing technologies in the classroom be utilised better, and what support do teachers and schools need to enable this? This whole school ICT development program, as it was named, was really quite a excellent thing to do, because we looked at what do they have available to them right now, rather than what do we need to put in place to change things. One of the major outcomes of this was the need to be pedagogically focused and pedagogically educate teachers and schools on what their focuses need to be. also probably I think the most important question is, what are we trying to achieve? And again, very often this is one of the last things that are thought about with introductions of technologies into education. What time will it save, or what will it make more efficient? Sometimes releasing teacher time and making more time available for them to do the actual teaching and enhance the learning is a really important thing. So something that will save time on something that you can do already, it can have a massive effect. Can I use it as a whole class learning tool? Is it something I can do with that? And what if I integrate it into student assessments? Can I make my assessments better? Can I turn the assessments from purely ones that are a snapshot of where they are into something that's actually more formative rather than just being summative? Only when you're clear about these and have answers to what the questions are about, should you consider the implementation, i.e. how we're going to make it work, and then only then the installation. That is, what are we actually going to put in place? What are we going to purchase to make it happen? I've always encouraged and always seen the most success, what I call the 80-20 rule, which I think is crucial to success with technologies in education. That is, approximately for every £80 or dollars spent on technology, you should be spending 20 on professional development and pedagogical support and preparation for the education staff who are delivering the education courses and supporting the students. Of course, the proportion varies, but the principle is really important. It's imperative that the cart and horse are in the right order if success is going to happen. In summary, and simply put, decide what the education outcomes and aims are, examine and work out how to implement them by appropriate technologies, and look at what they can do with other methodologies that are already in place. And only then should you make decisions as to what technologies will fit and what will meet the needs of the students and the teachers in front of them. Thanks very much for listening. And please, if there are any questions, I know if you have had any questions, we'll put in the chat. Then please do let me know. I think Adrian is managing the questions. So, Adrian, is there anything come through?
Yeah, hi David. Thank you very much. That was really interesting. Thank you. Yes, I've got a few questions here. So I will start. I'll try and do them in order of perhaps easy to answer for you, or easier to answer. So one question is, as a teacher, where do I start? So that's a very open-ended question, but hopefully there are some tips you can give us about how a teacher begins to use technology. I presume they're a novice user.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, as a novice user, one of the things I found with technology, which is a really important thing I had to remember as a teacher, was the students most of the time know more about it than I do. And so you have to reconcile yourself and get used to the fact that that is a very different way of working than you've been used to as a teacher. The vast majority of the time, you know more than the students. But all of a sudden with technology, it's a case of they know more about it than you do, and you have to embrace that and accept that. So that's the first thing, is to take that on board. And the second thing is to think about, again, is it making my teaching better? Is it making the learning better? And that's all the way through, is just to start on a simple way, on a step by step, not trying to embrace everything at once, but trying to use things in a simple way, just to start things off. So, for example, when I was doing a lot of teacher training with whole class technologies and interactive whiteboards and this kind of thing, with the novice teachers, I'd say, okay, use it. First of all, find an activity, use it. Just use it for your introductory part of the lesson to begin with, for the first 5 or 10 minutes, and then switch it off, and then do what you've been doing so far, and build slowly and surely, so you're learning yourself as you go along how it happens.
Great, thank you, David. And then I have another one, which is it better to give students access to computers or teachers?
It's ideally you want to give everybody access to them, but that's not the reality on the ground, is it? It's often it's about the economies can really impact on this. You can have the biggest impact on the biggest number of people in terms of students, where the teachers have access to the technology itself. And if you know resources are difficult, then a teacher with access to the right technologies can impact more on the students than just the students themselves. But you know, again, it's the right thing for the right place. You know, with the use of individual devices, be it laptops or tablets or whatever it might be has a place, and a fantastic place for students. And I think one of the things that's quite underused is using devices, certainly in upper primary and lower secondary. I personally feel is using devices in a small group context, where you're asking groups to come up with solutions to things, and giving them open-ended questions. Sort of saying, okay, what we want you on this particular topic. Once we've learnt this topic, we want you to then present that to the class and give them an opportunity to decide how they do it. I've seen this work really, really well, where you give students devices. Some of them they do a PowerPoint, some might do a video, some might do a small animation. So giving them access to it in a controlled setting, I think, has an awful lot of power.
Okay, thank you. I've got a couple more if there's time.
I think we have, yeah.
Yeah. Can you give me an example of when you have seen ICT really working in schools?
Yeah, lots of examples. But I think the most important ones I mentioned earlier is where the teacher has had the right support and confidence to use it, and where it's actually kept the focus on the educational outcomes. The worst thing you can see, I don't want to talk negatively, the worst thing you can see is where technology lets you down. So again, the teachers have to have the confidence themselves, but also the confidence in the technology they're using, be it bandwidth, be it internet access, be it device stability, all this kind of thing. So, in terms of the examples, there are many, many of them. But again, depends whether you're looking at whole class teaching, individual activities, for assessment activities, individual learning systems where they take students through learning activities themselves and give the teachers the feedback that's required, or for, as I mentioned earlier, about group work. But there's far too many to mention, but we can certainly make a list of those if people are interested.
Okay, and the last one then, this is going to challenge you. I think you said there's no silver bullet, but if you answer this one, you might have found it. What can we do to make sure the 3 I's are considered when education systems are funded at a government level? So I guess they're talking about how can a school be involved in decision making.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I saw in the work that we did with the Teachers First program in Egypt over 5 years was where you involve stakeholders at all the different levels, all the way from the classroom teacher and the students and the parents and the school leadership through to the regional education heads through to the central government, and having some input and showing the benefit to all of those stakeholders means that the buy-in and the realization of what the impact can be is really important. So, for example, if you're introducing something at a school level that allows the school principal to monitor and see what's going on and see good practice, and then allows all the way through to for example, the Minister of Education, allowing them to see how different regions and different schools are performing and really seeing the positive impact. That's very, very important. I wouldn't say it's a silver bullet, but I think having involvement and both in terms of when it's actually running, but I do think in terms of the building and building the concept, building ideas, that's a very important thing. In Egypt, we spent nearly 2 years in building the concept, building a rapid prototype that could then be scaled up, and that is really important there. That you learn very, very slowly, but you learn very, very clearly to make sure that everybody understands what the benefits might be. So. And that applies. That doesn't have to apply at the whole country level. It could apply just at a school level, where the parents and the children and the staff they understand what's important and they're on board with it. And then that input is taken consideration by the school management, the school leadership, when they're thinking about what do we do. There's nothing worse than seeing a school where technologies are put in place and the teachers then scratch their heads wondering what to do. It's much, much more effective if they're involved right at the start when we consider what are we going to put in place. But as I said, most importantly, first to answer, what are we trying to achieve? What's the education outcome we want to get?
Thank you.
That was more like a silver machine gun than a silver bullet. Sorry.
No, I think it's the age-old question, isn't it? Particularly the areas that we've worked is government funding is top down, and schools don't often get a say. So how you build that relationship between the users at the classroom level and the funders is critical, isn't it?
Absolutely.
That's
Okay.
it. Thanks, David.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Adrian. And thank you very much for joining us. And I haven't been able to see everybody's videos, and I hope we've all managed to resist the temptation to bring a bottle to work. You never know, that might have happened in the background there, but it's purely a glass of water for me. So thank you for joining us, and look forward to seeing you all again on the next of the Ed Talk series on the 3rd of March at 11 a.m. UK time, where Hamish will be taking us through sustainable professional development and how that happens. So look forward to seeing you all then. Thank you very much indeed.